All right, everyone, let's get the show started. It's office hours on July 1st, 2020. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We're a DevOps accelerator. That means we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it with you and then showing you the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. Again, that's cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to the Office Hours channel that you can then go ahead and share with your team. With that said, let's go ahead and kick this off. So just a few announcements here. It was reported to me via SuiteOps, embarrassingly enough, that our search was broken. So we've taken steps to fix that and prevent that from happening in the future. So if you are part of our Slack community, you might realize that there's just tons and tons of information there. So if you go to archive.suiteops.com, there is, first of all, sign up so you can join our Slack community. And then you can browse the history of anything that has happened in SuiteOps since the beginning of SuiteOps existence. So going back a few years now. This is a great, I don't know what's going on here. This is a great resource that I use all the time for searching. So you can search here for like issues you're running into. The other thing, frankly, I do also, if you didn't know, you can do this. You can go to Google. You can type site:/archive.suiteops.com and any search terms, and that's another great way to search our archives of all the chat history. Chances are somebody's asked the question before. Next, GitHub Commenter and GitHub Status Updater. So I know a bunch of you are using GitHub Enterprise, our previous incarnation of the GitHub Status Updater and GitHub Commenter only worked with the main hosted GitHub site. These have now both been updated to support GitHub Enterprise. This is really cool if you're using maybe Atlantis with custom workflows, because now you can have Atlantis add your own custom status updates to GitHub. Let's say you've added OPA like Josh Myers did. You can now have Atlantis post the GitHub status of OPA to your pull request using our GitHub status updater. The other thing is the GitHub Commenter. So let's say there's other metadata you want to associate as part of your pipelines. Some things that we like to do is post the time something was deployed to an environment related to a commit shop. We use the GitHub Commenter to do that. Very cool example of that is just if you go to Cloud Posse example app, and we can look at the commits here. And you see these comments here associated with the commits. Those were done using the Cloud Posse GitHub Commenter. So here we can see that this version was deployed by me to the staging namespace on this staging cluster at this time. And this was deployed to the prod namespace on the prod cluster at this time. So that's kind of cool. And that's where we use the GitHub status updater for that. I'll share these links in the SuiteOps, in the SuiteOps Slack here for you guys. There we go. Cool. Any questions about the search functionality or our GitHub utilities, the GitHub status updater, GitHub Commenter?
I have a question.
Yeah,
it might be for the end of this, but I'm kind of at a place where I've been thinking about trying out Atlantis a little bit more. haven't used it primarily on Terraform Cloud. And I really like the ChatOps type stuff or Git ChatOps that I see here. Would be interested in maybe after the other stuff is covered, just your experience in you know, in using Atlantis to facilitate this.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that for sure.
Okay.
It's a little bit like the grass is always greener on the other side.
Right.
I feel like if you're using Atlantis, there's a lot of things I would want with Terraform Cloud that I don't get. And yeah, if you're using Terraform Cloud, maybe there's some of the ChatOps stuff you would have wanted to have, but I don't know. I still feel like Terraform Cloud is in many ways the better way to go.
Okay.
If you've already gotten approved. But yeah, let's bring that up again. We'll talk about that.
Excellent.
The other status update is just our contributors have been doing a phenomenal job. Matt Gowie just opened up like 43 pull requests, I think, to upgrade the rest of our modules to the ChatOps commands using some automation. So those will get merged shortly. We've merged dozens of community contributed pull requests over the past week. So I really am happy with the progress here. This has really been made possible just by the contributors responding to the requests as they come in, and also improvement of our tests so that they're a little bit more stable, and excited about the potential of this collaboration. I believe, was it 2 weeks ago, we did a after office hours. If you check out the recording from 2 weeks ago, I guess that would have been end of June. You will see a demo, or you'll see a kind of a high-level overview of what we're doing on our GitHub Actions and our Terra tests, so you can see how our test infrastructure works. All right, so some talking points. Muhaha has shared a good question here that I'm actually a little bit interested in personally. So healthchecks.io looks to be an alternative to like Deadman Snitch. Maybe they do health checks as well, like Pingdom does, I'm not sure. What are the good, like very basic open source alternatives to this that just do one thing well, like external availability monitoring, that do you know, dead letter notifications, you know, like Deadman Snitch stuff that alerts if a check hasn't been received. Is there a nice, simple open source alternative for that, ideally, that we can use easily in Kubernetes? Any suggestions, anybody from the community? Sounds like, you know, I don't have the answer here. So also, Muhaha, are you on the call today? Okay, looks like he hasn't joined yet. The one thing I do want to point out, which is pretty rad, it's similar but different. It's not exactly answering your question, but it is answering part of it. How you can do this easily with Kubernetes.
You know, Eric, it sounds like you want to write such application on Kubernetes. You would be the first, because I think someone would know the alternative, I guess.
Well, so actually, I personally don't want to write the application and manage it. We do. Our head is spinning by the amount of stuff that we manage. But it did remind me of something else I'd seen a while ago, and something else I think we'll be using in one of our other projects at Cloud Posse. So there's a company called Stackator. They do a bunch of rad stuff. They're similar to Cloud Posse, Stackator. I think they're based in Sweden, actually. So maybe it's pronounced Stackator. And yeah, so they have a bunch of cool little utilities here for Kubernetes that we use a lot. So Forecastle being one of them. Forecastle is like this Kubernetes dashboard that lets you discover all the apps deployed in your cluster. Reloader is another one we use all the time. It allows you to automatically trigger rolling updates of your deployments if config maps or secrets change. But the one that I wanted to bring up right now is this one, the Ingress Monitor Controller. So the Ingress Monitor Controller reminds me of this question, like open source alternative for healthchecks.io and Kubernetes. So like in Kubernetes, when you want to monitor things, you want CRDs, right? You want things to happen automatically. You want things to, you don't want to have to deploy this service, then deploy this service, and or update this configuration. It brings me nightmares of Nagios, right? You deploy the service, then tell the ops team, hey, can you update Nagios to monitor this thing? No. So Ingress Monitor Controller, what this does is it gives you the ability to add an annotation to your ingresses. I think it supports services as, maybe it's only ingresses, hence Ingress Monitor. So you add this and then it'll automatically negotiate with a number of upstream check providers. So talking Uptime Robot, Pingdom, Status Cake, Uptime, Updown, Application Insights. I don't know if, to me, it looks like none of these are open source. So they're all paid solutions, but Status Cake is basically free. I forget how many checks you get for free. Maybe it's 50 or something. So it kind of answers your question. It's not open source, but it's not expensive. Also, Status Cake is pretty cheap, as I recall. Most of these services you pay to have more frequent checks as opposed to being limited on having the checks at all. Pingdom, of course, being the 800-pound gorilla in the space, having been around forever. That's what we would probably be using in this case. Is kind of the problem and the use case understood here? Why Ingress Monitor is a nice piece of the puzzle? All right.
I think in regards to like an open source solution of Uptime / Pingdom, I think it's a good argument for the build versus buy. I know they're not looking to build it, but maintaining it. I think a lot of these services are, it's a pretty competitive space. So like the pricing is actually quite,
it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, do you want to maintain something that's supposed to be checking whether you are up? Then you have to also make sure that that service is also running at all times.
Exactly. It's a slippery slope, and it's kind of like, what monitors the monitors. And I look at this as for the black swan stuff. This is for like all your other monitoring should catch your degradation, should catch your dips and your SLAs, SLIs, and SLOs. And this is like when all that other stuff fails, when all the other things, for whatever reason, didn't get you what you wanted when you needed it, this is what does. And I like that to be external.
That makes sense to me. I mean, think about if your entire Kubernetes cluster goes down.
Yeah.
For some reason, you have lost, Prometheus Grafana. You've lost, kind of whatever other monitoring you're doing. Istio, you've lost all of that. So it makes sense to have a completely external third-party service to be just, sending a little ping going, are you giving me a 200 back every 5 seconds or whatever? That can then, I don't know, do a PagerDuty email or something.
What's also nice about like Pingdom is it does multiple locations. So like it's always pinging you maybe from one location, but if it detects an error, then it suddenly escalates that to multiple regions to identify if this is
that's cool.
A regional failure.
Globally distributed type of, that's cool.
So that's a differentiator and value add. It's also helped us identify that, oh, look, we're inaccessible right now from Germany, but it's working everywhere else. And that could be local routing problems.
Is it something that you would use as the backend that you would query for, like, if you go to githubstatus.com, it gives you a nice, okay, all these services are up. Would you use something like Pingdom to check that, or would you use like?
Exactly, and this is kind of like it's a little bit, there's no black or white, right or wrong for this, but I will say that this has become more or less the norm for like if you're using Status Page, which is the other like #1 player for status pages. Again, it's a very popular space now, but this is the original service. They integrate with Pingdom. So this will tell you that you can have the same kind of thing, like what your uptime has been based on pingdom. And then you can, I'm not sure if you can break it down based on regions, but I think you can. It looks like here they do it based on regions. The other rad thing about status page is any other business that's on status page that your company depends on, you can automatically pull in their status page so you can have a composite on your status page of all the other statuses you depend on.
I've never heard of Atlassian. This is why I come to these things, because I had never heard of Atlassian status page until just now.
Oh,
That's because
okay.
Atlassian bought it recently, but it's been around for a long time. We used to be a huge fan of status page, and I hated Atlassian, and then I was kind of upset when they bought it, but whatever. I missed the beginning of this session because I was configuring a status page integration, so it was really amusing when I dropped into the office hours and was like,
hilarious.
oh, look, you're talking about the things I was doing. But I was doing it for non-Kubernetes old school thing where we wanted a pingdom check to trigger a status page component change and then simultaneously alert via Opsgenie. But then we realized the team that would get the alert didn't have an Opsgenie team set up, and I went down a long context rabbit hole. It was like, how do you teach this team about what pingdom is, what status page is, and what Opsgenie is, which is great. But last week, I configured New Relic synthetics monitors to move a bunch of our alerts out of pingdom and into synthetics, and we pay lots of money for all these products. And synthetics has the added benefit of being able to use minions, which are like bastion boxes, so that you can hit our internal services, because the things that I wanted to monitor were Atlantis and Argo CD and Vault and a bunch of our stuff that's not accessible to the public internet. And I couldn't do that I didn't want to do that with Pingdom. So I manually configured all this New Relic stuff to hit the minions, and then I deployed the minions via Argo CD. How do you guys do that? I'm really surprised
Pingdom doesn't have that concept yet, given that's all they do. And there's so much internal stuff that it would be opened up, and it'd be like, I mean, they make money by the number of checks. Why don't they provide this minion concept?
They actually do.
They do.
I was going to say they probably do.
You can get an internal agent from Pingdom that you run internally.
They do?
It's ridiculously expensive.
Oh, that's why I didn't see it, I guess. It's probably their enterprise offering then or something? Or?
Yeah,
does anybody do that?
We looked at it. We looked at it a long time ago, and I think we wanted it to check one thing, right?
Yeah.
Like everything else we were checking with New Relic, it wasn't a big deal, but this one thing we wanted to get under Pingdom, and the cost to put an agent internal was so ridiculous, we basically told them to go enjoy it, go pleasure themselves, and be gone.
Yeah.
We did have to pay for Synthetics Pro to get the minions too. Interestingly, the minions were available out of our New Relic subscription out of the box, which is a lot more expensive than Pingdom, because we don't pay for Pingdom. We pay for probably the cheapest Pingdom version there is. But the New Relic stuff worked, but I couldn't do multiple regions like Pingdom could without paying for Synthetics Pro. So we did end up ponying up money to get Synthetics Pro to get the Europe and US checking of stuff at the same time like Pingdom does.
Yeah, but you're getting a lot more value out of that, because that enables you to do other things with synthetics also.
Yeah.
And
which I don't do yet.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, the only reason I recommend Pingdom as opposed to what you're doing is, well, if you're not already, breaking the bank on New Relic, then, well, Pingdom is a drop in the bucket. Like, we're talking tens of dollars a month as opposed to thousands of dollars a month for New Relic.
We allow our teams to configure Opsgenie and New Relic things, but Pingdom, because it's a centrally managed account, is only exposed to the site reliability engineering team. And
hence you need the Ingress monitor controller, my friend.
Maybe, but it doesn't look like I can do it for internal services without paying for the premium Pingdom services. So maybe I want to extend Ingress monitor controller to work with New Relic synthetics checks.
Yeah, there you go. It looks like it's a very popular, it's a relatively popular project.
Synthetic monitoring is a new term for me. How is it different than from what I do in like Grafana, Prometheus Grafana?
That's a brand. How is New Relic different? I'll let somebody else answer that.
Yeah. Well, no, synthetic monitoring is a higher level monitoring where you are testing behaviors of a user, kind of like a synthetic user request.
But you could reproduce that in Prometheus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
conceivably, but then you know, Prometheus itself is just a general metrics bus, so you could have an exporter that does the same kind of thing. Yeah.
It's also for different tooling. It can be like Datadog has synthetic checks, and it's immediately like across the world. You have every region, you know, trying to get a certain response from a site, or you know, stuff like that. That's without doing customization, but it's basically immediately doing synthetic checks rather than just saying what did an actual user experience. If you don't have any traffic, you won't see any. You want to see that consistency over and over. It gives you that.
That's a good point.
Got it.
Yeah, so
I think
synthetic checks combined with also deployment notifications is pretty nice, because then you can correlate changes quickly.
I think
So I've been
user
doing-
flow monitoring is, but I just tried to Google like Prometheus user flow and various other open source things, and I guess it's a coined term for like the paid things. It's got to be a way to do it open source though.
That I'm looking at. There's some website called Raygun that I googled synthetic monitoring, and it came up, and one of the screenshots it has is uptime or average load times, which is something I can get, you know, in Prometheus Grafana, no problem. You know, it gives me P99 or whatever. But this cool thing is it breaks it down by browser. That's cool.
Yeah, that's good.
So like if I'm having an issue with a particular browser, that's pretty neat. I should look into that.
Marcin, are you still on the call? Let's see here. Yeah, Marcin, do you have any ideas on this? I know you've done a lot with Prometheus as well.
I love Prometheus, and I've been working with New Relic for quite some time, but New Relic is a paid product, and I'm not sure if every company can afford it. Prometheus is a cheaper option, but as you said, it's just a bus. You can feed it anything, and you can imitate what other tools do. And also you have the flexibility of the ecosystem of Prometheus to monitor whatever you want from whenever you want.
Have you seen
for
specifically
example,
something though for synthetic monitoring, or for like?
This I don't know, but if you would like to, you can write an application that will do that, and you can easily monitor it then with Prometheus.
That's left up as an exercise for the user.
But for example, I do have a MikroTik router in my home, which is used to my home network. Also, I have a Raspberry Pi, and I want to, because I already have Kubernetes cluster in Amazon, I want to monitor with Prometheus, which I already have, my MikroTik router. So I cannot expose those metrics to the world. So I created a site-to-site VPN with Amazon, and it just connects through the Pi and get the metrics. So this is what the minion does, and I think with a set of tools, you can mimic that quite quickly.
Are you running Prometheus on your Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster, you said?
No. I run it in AWS.
Okay. Just, I would have been impressed if
I tried run a Prometheus dashboard on a Raspberry Pi.
I tried to do it on a 3B plus, but it wasn't powerful enough. A 4 can do it, no problem.
Okay. Keep that in mind.
But still, I would have to connect the Prometheus that is in my home network with the Prometheus that is in private network in AWS. So still, you need to have some kind
But you have Thanos installed for that, right?
Well, I haven't used Thanos yet.
Because you need the scale for your home network.
Definitely.
Carson, did you configure that VPN in an open source code base that someone like myself might be able to crib out with?
It's not publicly exposed, but I can share it if you will ping me on a SuiteOps. It's written. The site-to-site VPN is configured in Ansible because my Raspberry Pi runs Ansible to Bootstrap and also my AWS instances as well. So I think on both sides is configured this way.
Yeah, we do a direct connect. All of our VPC configuration is in Terraform. I think I could do what you're talking about instead of paying New Relic to give me minions that I then deploy into Kubernetes clusters. I can't tell if it would be worth it though.
Yeah, probably.
All right, let's see what's next on the list of questions here. So what are the cons of running Fargate container as root user instead of a non-root user? This was asked by RB. RB, you want to ask any, you want to add any context? I think you're on the call. I saw you here in the
Can
beginning.
you add a Fargate?
Oh
Can
yeah,
you
he's
Fargate
muted.
containers?
RB, you're muted in case you were trying to say anything. And maybe he's just auditing today. So
is this like running privileged or not privileged?
Kind
When you
of.
launch a Docker?
Yeah. So I guess this is I guess they're different. Can you do privileged containers in Fargate? No, exactly. So this, I don't think you can. So this has got to be just in your Docker file, if you change user, with the user keyword to some other user as opposed to sticking in root. What are the pros and cons of doing that? I would only identify, more or less cons of staying as root, right? There's really no advantage to sticking with that other than if you had to. The downside is if your bootstrapping process for some reason needs to install packages at startup, which you shouldn't want to do or do at all, you can't do that. But
Unless you're installing using the user space. And
yeah, the other thing is like ports. You're going to have to make sure your services are listening on ports above 1024 because those are reserved for UIDs lower than 100, I believe. So you'll have to make sure your services are listening on like 8080 or any port over 1024.
I was thinking there's also probably a need to make sure that the image you're running matches the user you're running. Right, permissions wise.
Yeah, the file system permissions or not. Like, I mean, that can be a nice thing. Like, you don't want to modify files possibly that were uploaded to servers. So, if the files are owned by the web user and you're running as the web user, that might not actually be advantageous.
I just linked the list of things you're not allowed to do in Fargate.
It is.
And privileged is one of them.
Yeah. Did you share the list in the Office Hours channel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Is there a cap add in Fargate?
Oh.
For like ports. So if you want to bind to 80. Just curious.
I don't recall. Marcy, you know that one?
Sorry, I didn't pay attention.
Oh, can you add capacities or capabilities rather?
To Fargate? Well, I haven't used Fargate at all. I just used ECS, so I'm sorry, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So let's see here. So then, what is so reading into this here? But what is a good way to compare the cost of doing ECS Classic, so to say, on EC2s versus using Fargate? This is there's kind of like. There are different costs here to factor in, right? There's just the operating cost of, the EC2s are probably going to be less expensive than Fargate. I don't think Fargate supports spot instances. So, I mean, there are more things you can do to control your operating costs with ECS on EC2, but you got to factor in the human cost also of operating that stuff, and that's where it's a little bit more fungible. It's harder to come up with this calculation, and it comes down to, hey, what are you trying to prove to your company? Do you want to stick on the EC2s? Well, I'm sure you can make an argument for that. Or do you want to go to Fargate? I'm sure you can come up with an argument for that because there's enough gray area for both of these.
Hey, Eric.
Hey.
So this is RB. So this question came up because exactly what you were saying, like it was something that needed to be sold to upper people to see if it was like a viable move, and just like you said, managing an EC2 versus jumping on a Fargate has its own benefits, which we've also tried to quantify. Let me explain how I've come up with a way to compare it, and maybe you can try to poke holes in it.
Yeah,
So,
and frankly, I'm sure you've spent a lot more time thinking about this than I have, so I'm not sure how helpful I can be, but.
Well, I mean, I'll explain it, and if you can't explain, poke any holes in, I'm sure somebody else can. If nobody can, then I'll just assume for now that it's the best way forward.
You're on the right track. Yeah. Okay.
So, so ECS EP2.
1 second. Is it helpful if you share your screen or anything? I can stop sharing.
No, I don't have anything to share actually.
All right, just go on.
Okay, so the EC2 costs for ECS are that's basically it. It's just the EC2 costs. So when comparing it to Fargate, what I was trying to do was take one task definition and look at how many resources of the EC2 it was using, what percent. So let's say, for instance, that it's using 10% of the EC2 that it sits on. So I can just assume that whatever the cost of the EC2 is, I can say 10% of that EC2 cost can be attributed to that one task. So if I'm running 2 tasks, then that means, then whatever 20% of the EC2 cost is will be this particular task per month, So I was trying to use that as a way to peg the EC2 costs and then compare it to Fargate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the economies of scale here are going to be variable as you can have higher and lower density on that node.
And edge cases.
Yeah,
let's
it's
assume,
just rough kind of, yeah, I guess you can just come up with some rough.
Let's make some assumptions. Let's make no auto scaling and a static desired count, just to make the calculation simpler.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't matter because the result won't tell you which will be better for your workload. I don't think there's like a static workload. If you want to run ECS or Kubernetes, then you will go mostly all in. So there will be a lot of application and a lot of scaling, right?
Right, but
I don't think I would agree with that. There's like I run Jenkins in Kubernetes, and I can't scale it because it's Jenkins.
Yeah, there are some services that are just task of one, pod of one.
Yeah.
But then you will have a fleet of others, right?
We run Jenkins
but I guess
workers.
Those are the ones. Those are rounding errors, right? So those are the ones you can factor out probably. I mean, if this is even worth doing the calculation, you've got to have some quantity. Sizable quantity of tasks or pods that we got to factor into it. And that's what you want to be concerned about. But yeah, sorry, we interrupted you. Please go on and please go on with your calculation here. So yeah, so basically you're taking whatever percentage that task consumed of the ECS node, and then breaking that down into the amount of memory and amount of CPU, and then trying to map that to the equivalent unit within Fargate, and then coming up to with an apples to apples comparison kind of.
Exactly, and as long as your Fargate task definition fits the the Fargate table of values, then you can probably make a one-to-one comparison. But you have to make some assumptions in order to do it. So. So without auto scaling and without changing the desired count, and if the Fargate task definition is equivalent to the original task definition, is there anything else besides Spot? Because Fargate does support Spot now.
Oh, it does. Oh, cool.
It does, yeah. I believe since November or December, they have a Spot capacity provider. So without taking that into account or taking reserved instances into account, would that be a good one-to-one comparison, or is there something else I'm missing?
And my understanding, from everything you read online, is that's going to clearly say that Fargate is so expensive. So I guess finding out what that multiplier is and then figuring out if that multiplier is more or less than the human cost of the current solution, of the sunk cost.
Right. Okay.
So have you done that? I'm curious what number you've come up with for your workloads.
I've come up with some preliminary numbers, but a lot of the task definitions that you're pulling out of ECS EC2 may not be compatible with Fargate, and I've noticed that quite a few times. So you will have to probably change the task definition around. You may have to do right sizing at the same time, because if you have to change the task definition, CPU and memory, you're probably going to end up trying to audit the container and further try to right size it to make it fit those parameters. So it is kind of a complicated process. So far, I've come up with, you know, if we can assume that you're moving over a bloated container and at the same time you right size it, then you can really, and the same time you throw in Spot into it, because right now our reserved instances are less than 70% used. Then, you know, you're throwing in a lot of factors, but in the end, I was able to prove that going to Fargate, as long as you also right size and you also pick bloated containers to right size, you can save a lot of money. But one way of just looking at the Fargate versus managed EC2s, what I learned from a previous company is if you can peg your hourly rates at, say, like 500 an hour for maintenance, you know, obviously nobody's getting paid that much, but if you include benefits, etc., you give some kind of arbitrary number for maintenance per hour per employee. So if we're throwing in like 10, 20 hours of maintenance per month for these EC2s, then you can quickly say like, okay, so we're throwing in the gutter 10 grand per month. So, okay, 120 grand a year. So now if we factor that into the Fargate cost, how much more are we saving and how much more time are we opening up for other problems?
That's exactly what you do.
There's another side to the equation that I run into a lot that is maybe not relevant to everyone, but if you are in a situation where you have to meet strict compliance standards, in my case, it's the United States government. I need an ATO, which is authority to operate. It's, you know, the whole security process that results in a letter saying, okay, you're allowed to be on the network. Or if it's HIPAA or whatever, going with something like Fargate lets you inherit all that crap that AWS has done or what Azure has done if you're an Azure Container Service. And so literally all you have to get accredited on your own end is your container.
Wow.
Because you inherit all that other junk.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good to know.
That's been another win for those container services.
I'm gonna say that I've benefited from one of the Cloud Posse modules. I've got been working on deploying PoshBot, which is a PowerShell-based ChatOps bot, and it's wicked complicated to do with Teams compared to what I'm used to. Probably 50 different resources over Azure and AWS to get all of it going. And the ECS task definition modules have been so awesome. I didn't need to worry about learning all the JSON. I could just use Terraform natively. And in my case, I didn't want to host another server, deal with all of that. I wanted to have something that was dependable enough that people could rely on for, you know, ChatOps. So, you know, I went with Fargate as my first venture into this realm, even though it's more expensive possibly than, you know, than running it on ECS instance. It's just, I don't have to manage it now.
Yeah, I mean, I more or less agree with you. There was one question last week came up like, you know, where does this all fit in with your CICD? I think Terraform is pretty awesome at spinning up all this infrastructure, but Terraform isn't that awesome when you want to deploy new versions of your task definitions, because now you have to support Terraform in your CI/CD pipelines. This is where like Terraform Cloud for the win or using Atlantis might, you know, help out.
On the status page site, it talks about a subscriber. What is that?
The easiest way is to look at like any one of the status pages out there. So like status page, status dot like codefresh.io, let's say. Subscribe to updates. I think that's what a subscriber is.
And it emails you or something?
All these different formats.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I don't know if RSS subscribers count or how they calculate that, but maybe email subscribers. I haven't, to be entirely honest, the answer is I don't know. I always assumed it was related to this.
Got it.
The other thing is like, if you ever see a status page that looks like this, 99% chance it's statuspage.io.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen a lot of status pages that look like this. That shows how much of the market they've cornered. All right. Let's see here. So another question, again by RB. How to use multiple GitHub pull request templates. I confess that I know that we had this problem initially. I'm just trying to remember what the resolution was, and I'm going to try and do that by looking at one of our repos and seeing what we did. So for those of you not familiar, you can have this folder called .github in your any one of your repos, and in there you can have an issue template folder and a pull request template. So for issue templates, it's very easy. I know you can create these different configs here. Let's see, there's a config.yaml. This is another nice little trick I learned. So like if I go here to issues and do a new issue, you'll see I have this menu here of options. So I can direct the user possibly to a third-party issue system if I wanted to, or our site. So that's how we do that. The other thing is you can do something similar to that with pull requests, but I see that we aren't doing that. We just have a single pull request template. Let's see what you did here in your example in Slack.
It looks like you create a folder called pull request template.
Yeah, which is what he did, but he was having trouble with it. And that sounds vaguely reminiscent. I would just look at, like, make sure your templates have front matter. Do all your templates have the front matter?
So basically, exactly what you did with the issue templates. I created a directory called pull request template, and I stuck in there multiple .md files. So I have a default pull _ request _ template.md, and I have one specific for KMS.
Yeah, I think you might also have to have this front matter.
I think that's for the issue templates though, right?
Not positive. I think it could also be for I see. Look, it was a while ago now, and I just feel like we had these templates and they weren't working, and I just vaguely recall that when I added this, it started to detect them and it worked. But you know, your mileage may vary. Maybe this was a red herring, and my recollection could be totally wrong.
I'll definitely try it. That's a great idea. I'll okay, yeah, I can give that a try. See if that works.
And while we added, do you use global GitHub config?
So that was the other talking point here. This blew my mind. I don't know how I missed this since we've just gone through and updated 200, 300 repos with this information. I recently discovered you can have a .github freaking repository. So we know about the GitHub folder, but you can actually have a GitHub repository called this, and put those, I guess they're calling them community health files. So you can have these, which we know about too, but you can also have the templates you're talking about. So that way
I think that can also include actions as well, by the way. That's the piece that I was really interested in.
You can do actions?
Yeah, this is one of those things I chatted with you a while back, and the documentation is so sparse on this stuff
Yeah.
But centralizing repos is like my main problem. I have an individual repo per Terraform module and so on. And as I've added time, I'm trying to manage those better. And what I read was that you can grab like this to set up, default files like you're showing, but also your actions. I believe you can provide those so that when people provision new repos in, say, an organization or anything, they will actually be able to click on, say, add a action, and those preset workflows that you've provided could just be added with a click, like predefined.
Exactly. You have internal ones.
Oh,
Yeah.
You love it.
I found this today.
Don't you love it when you work your tail off on something and then somebody walks by and goes, "Oh, you could have done it in 5 minutes if you did it this way."
Yeah. Screw you, Sheldon.
Well, the documentation, like I said, I've actually known about that repo for probably 2 or 3 months, and I ended up submitting an enterprise support request just trying to find help, because this is like the only thing I found, and it's super sparse on what my mind goes to, which is simplifying the administration of all of these hundreds of repos by centralizing a lot of my templates and a lot of my workflows. It's really hard to find that information. You have to.
I Googled for this. I tried to do it before we doubled down on it. Yesterday we doubled down on it. Like, we just rolled out this PR to 40 more repos. But I guess we can just roll that out to 200 more and undo it, I guess, once we add this. But Mark, one thing is not clear to me. It's sounding like this only impacts when you create the repos. Does this also work for existing repos?
This I don't know. Maybe someone else knows.
Okay. Sheldon, does this work for only new repos, or does this also work for?
What I've read was that, like, the actions, you can pin versions and all that. But what I'm seeing right now in the notes right there, it says if the repository has any of its files, then it would be used. But it sounds like you can override locally, but I'm guessing that this is one of those inheritance things.
Which would be perfect. That'd be rad.
Yeah.
I'd love to override locally, but I'd love to default it to this one repo.
Yeah.
So yeah, this gets really interesting. Also, like, probably, Marcin, we're talking about those pre-commit hooks. We probably want to pre-commit hook Git actions, so we can just reuse that logic as an action as well to enforce it.
Yep, I do one of those in all my pipelines. It works perfectly.
Nice.
For what it's worth, in case there's this doesn't solve it, there's one other action that I thought was really interesting. Somebody created a GitHub workflow that was designed to take one repo and then, like, synchronize those out to all the remaining repos that you have. So even if this doesn't solve the full problem, take a look for that.
Can you share that in the office hours? I'd be really interested in doing that. I was thinking of building something like that anyways. I was just a little bit concerned about the PR DOS attack against GitHub. Like, open one PR against this centralized repo, open up 300 PRs against all the other repos, and then everybody else who has to review those. That gets painful real fast.
It feels like there should be a demonstration account that has all of these actions pre-populated with examples of what actions are available, right? Because this could be public, right? It's a public .github repository. Are there any demonstration accounts that people?
Or who demoing who? Cloud Posse demoing, or GitHub the company demoing?
Anybody, right? Since it's like you can add. It's saying you can add default community health files to the root of a public repository. So why isn't there a demonstration?
So I'll confess, I found it by stalking Terraform AWS modules. That's the first I saw it. They have an example here if that's helpful for others. Come on, wake up. There we go. GitHub. There we go. So
GitHub has one.
Yeah, that's a great term to search for in Google.
GitHub.com/GitHub.GitHub.
Yeah, and it's the same thing as it's all of the documentation about using your local .github repo in your repository.
That's what made it impossible to find.
It's terrible.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. What is that stale? Is this built in?
Oh, so they're providing the defaults for, like,
neat.
their HashiCorp Scalebot or whatever that is that they use to, like, close out old issues. That's cool.
Cool. Yeah. So I need another project. Like I need a hole in my head. But yeah, I guess expect to see a future demo of this at Cloud Posse, because we obviously got to adopt this as the way forward. We've been using our build harness to kind of Jimmy rig this, but yeah, this sounds like a much more sane approach longer term. Do I see any hands being raised right now? No, joking. All right. Next question here. All right, we covered everything on our talking points. We got about 9 minutes left on the clock. Anybody have other questions we can help answer?
Well, I'd like to say one thing about the Fargate, because there was comparison, and I think the discussion could be easily continued for hours. Because I have so many opinions about ECS, but looking at Fargate, ECS plus EC2, this is the combo, and EC2 also needs maintenance, where Fargate doesn't. And if it comes down to price, then obvious choice would be probably ECS in most cases for infrastructure. But the Fargate, I think, will be used more and more often, because the cost will get lower, and it had multiple like price cuttings during the years.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the minimum task is on a Fargate, but this is something that a lot of people avoid Fargate because they are scared of a cost of small application that will never use the resources. But I think the automated services from AWS will be more and more used, and eventually ECS EC2 will be forgotten, where ECS Fargate probably will be continued.
Yeah. So in terms of future-proofing yourself, I think that's another good consideration here, is that, yeah, it was brought up like the continued maintenance on the EC2, and you estimated it at like 10 or 20%, I forget the number exactly. But there's also like this concept of future-proofing. And if you are investing in Fargate, that's built into it as well, while the stuff that you're doing on EC2 is inevitably going to experience bit rot and have other things. Yeah, maybe it's factored into those other costs of support, but it creeps up on you in such a way where suddenly 2 years from now, you just want to throw it away. It's so bad, versus if you're using a more fully managed service, you don't think about that. Like I never think about RDS anymore, right? It's always there. It just works. I don't think about the updating the Datadog monitors for RDS, or updating the base OS, or updating all these other things that come up to bite you when you have to manage the underlying EC2s.
So for example, many companies will run into a problem with ECS, EC2, and even that during the scaling, you will have you can have an outage when you will get spike of the traffic and you need to spin a lot of instances. Where ECS Fargate, maybe it's more expensive, but if you will look in that, how healthy will it be in future, you just rely on SLA from AWS. Where ECS, EC2, this is your responsibility, patching, making it secure, a lot of things. So this is my opinion. I would go Fargate. But yeah. I'm not paying for it.
Should we be using Fargate profiles with EKS now and getting the same benefits? I don't know.
So that brings up an interesting question for me, is for the things you do have to worry about going through and maintaining and updating, how do you track all that?
Yeah, that is a good one. I think there's a product opportunity here.
Big Excel spreadsheet, that's what we do, and it sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that there's a definite opportunity for something, for a product there. The challenge is that it spans things. It's like you need to have it, you need to be knowing like your AMIs, your containers, your charts, and then down below that, you have the next layer, which is your application. I'd say on the application side, it's a better the tools out there are a lot better depending on the framework you're using. Like if you're using Python or Node or Go, the tools are really good. But when we're talking about all these other things, the tools are not that good. Obviously, there's a Dependabot, right? That's kind of there along those lines, but Dependabot's not doing your Helm files.
Right. That's, I mean, Dependabot will do like, you know, your Maven Central, you know,
Terraform
dependencies or whatever.
Yeah.
But
it
it
still
won't.
doesn't work for Terraform. For Terraform for me for the later versions.
Are you sure? Because I keep getting all the Dependabot spam on the ones we have implemented it on, but
On 12?
Well, we on the Terraform version. Is someone using the Terraform new version?
13?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, nobody.
Cue the
I'd
crickets.
I'd love to, but none of the modules support it yet.
Maybe.
I'm trying not to get my
Eric,
hopes
maybe
up.
you
Ooh,
would be
sick
the first
burn.
ones.
I've got enough tools to try then to jump on the beta when it's going to be released next month. I've got to slow down a little bit.
Amen. There's so many different things I want to do that aren't ridiculously early betas.
I have a question for everybody. GitHub Actions. I'm newer to that, and so I have Azure DevOps pipelines, and right now, most of what people are comfortable with, maybe a fourth of the team that does any type of automation, they do some Jenkins. I've done Azure pipelines, and because all of our code sits in GitHub, I'm finding that while I love the flexibility, it's just plug and play, stupid simple to get going. It's an extra step to link everything, you know, to make sure that the stuff is set up, and it adds another hurdle versus GitHub Actions where I can check it in. I'm getting better at like having it automatically say format, say some PowerShell scripts, and then recommit that into the pull request. You know, some cool stuff like that. But what I'm trying to figure out as I'm doing that is, one, how have you, or is there a central dashboard or something that lets you see this across many small repos? And secondly, to improve the performance, I just recently tried to stop using individual workflow files and put them all into like one job with individual steps. I would like to know, because I think that's like a runner, like the scope is like per job. Those are the two things that I'm really curious about with GitHub Actions.
I think the visual side of GitHub Actions has a lot lacking, and that's like the differentiator you get. Like if you go with the CodeFresh, where it's just a beautiful UI, you get a lot more visibility. Then you have things even like in CodeFresh that in Jenkins you had that I wish we had. So I don't know, GitHub Actions is probably, that's on a scale of 1 to 10, they might be a 3 or 4 on the UI side. But in terms of integration into your repo and usability, yeah, they're like an 8 or 9, I would say in my book. They're not a 10 because I hate the open source experience using GitHub Actions.
And about the monitoring, I don't think GitHub provides it, but it's possible that it's in their API. So I guess someone already created an application that will monitor multiple checks on multiple repositories, and if not, you can code it.
Yeah, let's see.
I can code
GitHub
it. In Python it should be probably simple.
Prometheus exporter.
Oh, maybe Prometheus. Cool.
Oh, look at that. There we go. Spendesk, GitHub Actions exporter.
Someone already did it.
So yeah, Prometheus for the win. But your mileage may vary. The open source stuff is sometimes a little bit more rough around the edges.
I'm not doing deployments with it. A piece is, we're not really doing automatic deployments for any of this stuff other than through Jenkins. For my use case, I've been trying to simplify things like, applying linting and maybe copying something up into AWS, stuff like that. And as I've been juggling back and forth, at least what I'm finding, because of the nature of working with like DevOps work, I don't have one app database where I can just like do all this magic. I've got my container builds, I got everything, and it's just like, good. I'm jumping between a lot of small individual repos, and it becomes really annoying. I know there's some things you can do, like maybe that GitHub org repo,
Mhm.
But at least when I've started this, it feels like I'm repeating a lot of these little pieces over and over instead of just being able to edit it centrally.
So what you said elicited two thoughts. One is that I think we're entering into an era where, or we're coming out of an era where you had one CI system. It was Jenkins. It did everything. It fell over and the whole company came crashing down to a system where you have lots of systems that fill in specific purpose-built roles. You'll have your chatbots, you'll have your GitHub Actions, you'll have your Azure pipelines, you'll have different systems that do different things very well. And the other thought is a pattern I've seen used by others here. I think most recently, Brian Ty, if you're still on the call, is doing this. You can have your GitHub Actions call your other pipelines. So since GitHub Actions integrates so natively, so nicely into GitHub, why not have a GitHub Action that sets up your Azure DevOps stuff? And then you have a tight integration where Azure DevOps does what it does best, GitHub Actions do what it does best.
I use GitHub Actions to trigger my CodeFresh pipelines. What CodeFresh does well is Docker build caching, just stronger machines in general. But what GitHub Actions does well is code-based triggers that I wasn't able to do well in CodeFresh.
Yep.
So I have like template repositories with like default GitHub Actions that I can just, whenever we have like a new service that we want to spin up, it will just have the default like CodeFresh pipeline GitHub Actions workflow in there already. And it will trigger like merge to master will deploy to dev, creating GitHub release will trigger the CodeFresh pipeline to deploy to production and stuff like that.
I think that's really cool. I'd like to see a demo of that sometime.
Yeah.
All right, we are out of time for today. I'm sorry. We gotta put the brakes on, leave something to talk about for next week. So.
Oh, come on, Daddy, one more story.
I wish, Andrew. Well, thank you guys all. This was an awesome session today. Learned a lot myself. This thing where you can have GitHub Actions inside of your GitHub repository centrally. I got to look into that. That sounds just too good to be true. So thank you guys for sharing that. See you guys same place, same time. If you missed today, or if you want to share this with others, feel free to share the link to the recording that will be posted in the Office Hours channel. Again, if you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. Thanks again. See you guys all same place, same time next week. Take care.